Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and thank you for joining us for the Stats Cafe on Mapping the Way Forward, launching the new CRVS Systems Improvement Framework, which is being jointly hosted by the Economic Commission for Africa, the Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific, and Vital Strategies. My name is Chloe Harvey, and I work with the Civil Registration and Vital Statistics team here at ESCAP. And it's a pleasure to be the moderator for today's session. And I'm particularly excited about this webinar as it is an area very close to my heart because over the past few years, I've had the privilege of working with many countries throughout the region to support CRVS system strengthening through business process improvement. So before I introduce this session and our wonderful speakers, I would just like to go over a few housekeeping notes. As attendees of the webinar, your mics and cameras are automatically turned off to reduce any background noise, but please do feel free to post all of your questions and comments into the chat box, and we will come to them at the end during the Q&A session. This webinar will also be recorded, and the video will be made available on the Stats Cafe website by the end of today. So, on to the topic of today's session. What is the CRVS Systems Improvement Framework, you may ask? Well, it is a practical, step-by-step methodology that helps countries map, analyze, and strengthen their civil registration and vital statistics processes using a participatory and holistic approach, which looks at the whole of the CRVS system from the moment a birth or death occurs to its registration and certification. The first edition was released in 2021, and over the past 4 years, countries have been using this framework to guide comprehensive assessments which aim to redesign and strengthen the functioning of CRVS business processes, making civil registration processes simpler, systems interoperable, and reducing the burden on family members who are registering vital events. Implementation of this framework by countries has produced a wealth of practical insights and lessons learned. And these are insights that have shaped and enhanced the updated framework that we are very pleased to be launching today. So during this session, you can learn more about the CRVS Systems Improvement Framework and the significant revisions which have been made, including its sharper focus on equity and linkages with ID systems. It also includes real-life use case examples from countries who have conducted an assessment already and other new features which have been added. We're very grateful to all of the countries whose lessons learned have informed this framework update, and also to all of the development partners whose technical inputs have guided this revision, including ESCAP, ECA, WHO, Vital Strategies, the World Bank, IOM, the Pacific Community, UNDP, Swiss TPH, the Gender Equity Unit, and Bloomberg Philanthropies Data for Health Initiative. We have a fantastic lineup of speakers for this session and are delighted to have 2 country representatives who will be sharing the experiences and lessons learned from Ghana and the state of Bihar in India in using the framework to conduct a comprehensive assessment, analysis, and redesign of CRVS business processes. Our first speaker will be Nicola Richards, who is the research lead for the CRVS team here at ESCAP and has been really instrumental in leading the drafting of this updated framework. Then we will hear from the 2 country representatives joining us today. We have Mr. Pravin Kumar, who is the Deputy Chief Registrar at the Directorate of Economics and Statistics, Government of Bihar in India. And we also have joining us Mr. Emmanuel Bochwe, who is the Principal Assistant Registrar at the Births and Deaths Registry in Ghana. So thank you to all of our speakers for making the time to join the discussion today. So without further ado, I would like to invite Nicola to start us off with an overview of the framework and to update us on the new features in its update. Thanks.
Thank you, Chloe. Hello, everybody. Yes, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. So as Chloe mentioned, my name is Nicola Richards and I work with ESCAP, although I am dialing in from where I live in New Zealand. So lovely to see everybody tonight. So really quickly, I won't spend too much time talking about what the framework was, and we'll save time to focus on and what it has become, which, as Chloe said, is quite exciting. But if we go to the next slide, please, just really quickly for those who maybe haven't had much experience with the improvement framework before. So as Chloe mentioned, it was launched back in 2021, and it was built on experiences of using different tools, particularly the rapid and the comprehensive assessment tools. There was also a number of strategic planning documents that ECA had put together, and really at that time the experts came together under the leadership of ECA to try and develop a new framework that could be used as part of strengthening our CRVS systems, and that led to the launch of the CRVS Systems Improvement Framework in 2021. Next slide. And really at the core of the framework, there's kind of on the second dot point there, you can see the two key bullet points. It's process centric and it's results driven. And this is what we'll talk about a little bit more around, using tools like business process mapping that really help both identify issues with current systems and pinpoint, these pain points and these bottlenecks, which can then be linked to strategic performance indicators to help get to this results-driven outcome. Of course, with anything that we do with CRVS, it's always multi-sectoral, it's always participatory. We need to have all of the stakeholders engaged, and that hasn't changed at all. It is also modular and customizable, and version 1 that was released back in 2021 has been implemented in several countries, and we'll hear a little bit about experiences with that soon. And some of the impacts that we've seen from using this first version of the tool was help around, for example, implementing digital systems. The tool has been really instrumental in some countries as part of their redesign of national policies and legislation. So it's had some really key impacts, I guess you could say, globally. Next slide, please. But as with any tool or framework or approach, there was a feeling after a few years of using it that it could be improved, like anything. So there was a series of consultative meetings that were held, and that just really brought together all of the countries and the partners that had been using this first version to just talk about their experiences, what worked well, maybe what were some of the challenges, what didn't work so well. So that was kind of one part of just the reflection and the building from lessons learned. There was also the recognition that, CRVS, it's changing rapidly. The real focus on integration and readiness with ID systems perhaps wasn't as strong when the first version was released. And there was also a recognition, that we really wanted to focus more on strategic outcomes. So having a much clearer idea from the start that we're not just doing this assessment or this process mapping, for no reason, but what are going to be the concrete outcomes from it. And there was also a reflection that we needed, as our systems at the national level got stronger, that we needed to start to focus more on the groups perhaps at risk of getting left behind. So more of an emphasis on things like equity and gender responsiveness, and making sure that certain groups weren't getting left behind as the national system improved. And of course, as with anything, there was a reflection that perhaps we could make some of the tools a little bit more user-friendly and a little bit more practical. So next slide, please. So with that, we started a very intensive review methodology, which included document reviews. We spoke to many people, including countries that had used the version 1 of the framework, partners who have helped support it, and also partners just working in the CRVS field. It went through several rounds of external review, and you can see there we tried to speak and really include as many people as we could, which is why we're a little bit behind schedule, but I feel we got a good outcome from that. So next slide, please. And then, so what has stayed the same? Next slide. And of course, the core tools that make up the framework, they haven't changed. So our business process descriptions and our mapping, so BPM or BPI as it's sometimes referred to, that stays as the heart of the tool, right? So that's still one of the core process-centric aspects of the tool, and that has not changed. And we also have the CRVS SAR, which is our system analysis and redesign tool, where as you're going through the framework, you can keep a record of all of the issues that are identified and potential redesign ideas. That has been moved across to an Excel spreadsheet, but the functionality and the core principle behind those have not changed. Next slide. But we're getting to the good part now. What has changed? Next slide, please. So one of the really exciting things is that it is now available online. And I'm going to be a pain right now, and hopefully I don't break all of the IT that's been working so well, but I'm going to try and take control of the presentation. All things going to plan. Everything's been running so smoothly. Oh, yeah, I think. All right. All things going to plan. You can see the website. Yeah, thank you.
Yes.
All right. So I'm going to put the new link in the chat as well. That will take you onto this lovely new interactive website that we have developed. So essentially all of the resources now are available online through this website here. We've got our main chapters down the side, and as you can see, when you click to go into a different chapter, you also get these sub-page headings on the side. So just to improve navigation, because there is so much information in the framework, we felt that having it online would just make things much easier for people to come in and really just pinpoint the aspects that they're interested in. Of course, with everything, on every page, you'll see this little sign here that says copy, or this little thing, and you can go through here and you can copy the pages, but you can also export as a PDF. And on the side here under our resources, everything that's online can always be downloaded, so that if you can work, if you need to work offline, it has that functionality. But the great thing now is the bulk of it is available online, and the good thing with that is it's going to make it much easier to update and keep it relevant. And I will come to this later, but a big part of the new online version is to really try and have a repository of all of the country experiences. And this is where I'll come back to it, but we'd really love more input from the countries who have used version 1 and are going to use version 2, so that we can have these profiles that talk a little bit about what the country did, what the outcomes were, and then also links to the various documents that are available. So we hope that over time, this online version can become a really interactive and engaging platform to host both the tools, but also all of these resources that are developed to kind of support country implementation. There we go. So I'll stop sharing now, and then with the magic of technology, we'll see if we can find our way back. I didn't break it yet. And I'll pop, while we're getting the slides back up, let me pop the link in the chat. Okay, so that's one of the main changes there, is that we've now got it all available online, which is fantastic. Next slide, please. And a few other things just around kind of what has changed. What we've done in version 2, the conceptual framework itself hasn't really changed from the first version, but what we've tried to do is just make it a lot stronger and kind of have this more upfront about what some of the core reasonings are behind, you know, what the framework should be. So things around country leadership and ownership, you know, that it should be proactive and inclusive. So part of the review was just to try and reflect these kind of core values a little bit stronger throughout the different stages of the framework. Next slide. What we've also done, just reflecting on country experiences in particular, so the first version kind of was broken down into 3 main stages. With version 2, we've pulled out all of the activities that are associated with planning and preparation. We've called it stage 0, but we wanted to reflect the fact that, it was a stage in and of itself, and there's a lot of work that needs to go into this kind of planning and preparation before the actual assessment itself can begin. So there's been a lot more time and thought put into, really outlining what are the kind of key enablers and building blocks that should be in place before beginning the assessment. So that's had a lot more attention given to it, and it's now its very own stage. Next slide. I mentioned at the start as well, so we've tried to keep kind of two core aspects of the framework. So one is that it's process centric, and the other one is that it's results orientated. And so there's a lot more of a focus in the second version around the use of key performance indicators and how they can be integrated right from the beginning of the assessment as you're looking at things that aren't perhaps working too well in the system, and you're identifying potential intervention areas and redesigns. It's linking that to some really concrete outcomes. One, that's always a good thing to do when we're improving our systems, but also to give the evidence, right? So that we're continually monitoring and evaluation, but also learning from what we're doing to make sure that these improvements are hopefully improving the system, or it's not having any negative outcomes. So you'll see a lot stronger focus on key performance indicators and how they can be integrated throughout continual process improvement. Next slide. The other big change, and I couldn't really reflect it particularly well in a PowerPoint slide, but when you go through the framework, what you'll see throughout it is there's been a much stronger focus on integration with ID systems and kind of assessing system readiness, in terms of the links between CRVS and ID. So I've pulled out a couple of pages from the updated version, but really you'll see it integrated throughout. So kind of at each of the main steps throughout the framework, there's these little extra activities and questions that we've tried to put in there to say, how is this linking to ID? Or, is there an issue that we need to be thinking about? Do we have the right partners in the room? So you'll notice that coming through a lot stronger through version 2 of the framework. Next slide. As with ID systems, there's also a much bigger focus on things like equity and gender responsiveness. And again, along the main steps of the framework, we've just put some little text boxes like what we've got here, just to remind people to be thinking, do we need to be, have we got the right people in the room, I should say? Are there groups that perhaps might experience civil registration differently? Do we need to be including them? How can we include them as part of this framework? So you'll see that in version 2 as well. Next slide. And as I mentioned before, we've got the country kind of use cases and examples. And again, this is my plea to people who have used the framework and are happy to share some of their experiences. So much of what was useful in revising the framework came from the country feedback. So we'd really love to see more countries providing some experiences and sharing kind of how they've used the framework, how they changed it, and also any kind of outcome documents as well that are publicly available that we can share. We really want to be able to build this and kind of build this as a great knowledge repository of sharing experiences, and of course always making the systems better and sharing knowledge across the globe. Next slide, please. So what's next? As I mentioned, here it is again, additional country examples will be added as they become available. We will, the good thing about moving it online is it makes it much easier for us to update and refine as countries, use it, and as new tools become available, we can link across and really strengthen that. So it gives us that flexibility that the offline version didn't have. There's already talks about version 3.0. Perhaps reflecting about the need for a little bit more focus on these integration with ID and ID systems and how could we do that. And there's also the recognition that while a lot of countries have done stage 1, and we've got some really good learnings for people that did the assessment, we haven't use the tool as much in stages 2 and 3, which is more about implementation and then also the monitoring and evaluation. So as countries start to move through the full framework and we get their experiences, there'll probably very clearly be an opportunity to update the framework based on those learnings as what we've already done. But that'll to come. For now, we're happy with version 2.0. Well, I'm happy with version 2.0. Next slide, please. And so just again, a big thank you to all of the partners and all of the countries and everyone who provided their time as part of, the feedback on this. It is what's made it what it is. Again, feedback on the framework is very welcome. There's the email address there, and when you go onto the online version, you'll also see the email address there. So we're keeping a running record of feedback that's given, and we'll be doing kind of regular updates to the website to reflect those, and then keeping a note of kind of bigger things for change that might have to come with version 3.0. So on that, I will put a pin in it, and very excited to hear from the countries. Thank you, Chloe.
Thank you so much, Nicola, for guiding us through the framework and those important updates. And yes, as you said, this isn't going to be the final version of the framework, so please do send your feedback on that. The plan is for the framework to undergo updates as new insights come to light from countries who are implementing the framework. And I saw also a question in the chat about whether we have a hard copy available of the framework. We don't have a hard copy as such. It has been migrated to this website, but as Nicola explained, it is possible to export chapters of the framework as PDFs if you go to the website. So hopefully that helps. So now we will move on to our next speaker, Mr. Pravin Kumar, who is a Deputy Chief Registrar, to hear the experiences of the state of Bihar in India in implementing the assessment and analysis and redesign of birth and death registration processes. So Pravin, over to you.
Okay. Good afternoon. I am Pravin Kumar, serving as a Deputy Director cum Deputy Chief Registrar, Birth and Death, State of Bihar, India. I would like to express my sincere thanks to ESCAP and for giving me the opportunity to make this presentation in the State Café. Now, please, next slide. In India, birth and death registration is mandatory under the RBD Act 1969, but the states are responsible for implementation. In Bihar, this is done by the Directorate of Economics and Statistics. Despite progress, challenges remain in achieving full and timely registration. So a CRVS improvement project was started using CRVS system. An improvement framework, a long-term process-driven approach. The initiative received strong support from our Principal Secretary Planning and Development. Next. Online registration was introduced in Bihar in 2015 and upgraded in 2024. It has improved service delivery, but digital tools alone are not enough. To simplify and improve the system, process must be redesigned to be people-centered and efficient. To simplify the improvement and system process must be redesigned to the people-centered and efficient. In 2023, amendment to the RBD Act supported a shift, enabling a national database and integration with other government systems. This gave further momentum to Bihar CRVS improvement efforts. Next. In the first phase, assessment, analysis, and redesign, a participatory approach, youth workshop, and field visit are organized. Staff involved in registration are registrars, health staff, data entry operator, shared experience, and helped identify bottlenecks They were asked to build the system from the client side, not just the providers. This was guided by the three principles: move information, not people. One step registration and certification. Next. Restarts and next restart all event within 21 days. A report of 23 practical recommendations finalized after a review the core team of the days. Next. Next. Okay. Next. Yes. Let me now mention four key bottlenecks and strategy proposed. Rural home events are registered at the block level, requiring families to travel multiple times. It is proposed to reinstate Panchayat Secretary as registrar and involve Anganwadi workers in reporting. Government has already reinstated Panchayat Secretary as registrars in the rural area. Second is non-standard local procedure, create delays and confusion. SOP should be developed to ensure consistent and simplified process across the state. Next. Weak use of data limits timely improvement. Service delays remain hidden. It is recommended to introduce dashboard and regular monitoring to improve decision making and performance tracking. No cause specific death data limits health policy planning. The MCCD system should be assessed and a plan developed with the health department for a statewide implementation and reporting. Also, some strategy like SOP and improved data use can help solve more than one issue, showing the system-wide nature of the changes. Next. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Praveen, for sharing the experiences of Bihar. And I know that you mentioned it in your slides, but I think a big congratulations is in order to you and everyone who works with you for already implementing one of those recommendations, which is reinstating the Panchayat secretaries, which for those who may not be aware of the context in India, it's the kind of lowest level of government, well, yeah, government structure. Is it village level, if that's right, Praveen?
Yes, yes.
So thank you. So they have reinstated Panchayat secretaries as registrars so that people living in rural areas have better access to registration facilities. So that's really amazing to see one of those recommendations already being implemented. Thank you. So now we will travel to a different part of the world and hear the experiences of Ghana, from Mr. Emmanuel Botre. I believe he's actually in Paris, though. So Emmanuel is the Principal Assistant Registrar for the Births and Death Registry in Ghana. Over to you, Emmanuel.
Thank you very much, and good morning and good afternoon to colleagues. Sorry about my camera. I'm having challenges with my camera this morning, so you would hear my voice, and sorry about that. You cannot see my face for now. Yes, so just to introduce that, this is the second time Ghana had a comprehensive assessment of the CRVS system, and we currently have a new strategic plan that is going to inform CRVS implementation up to the year 2030. Now let's go to the slides to share the Ghana experiences. The next slide, please. Yes, so for us to get into the implementation of the new assessment plan, these slides give a summary of the processes that were applied until the new strategy was ready. So we actually looked at the 2015 comprehensive assessment and then the first strategic plan. We looked at the implementations and the challenges that we associate with that. That was the post-implementation assessment. We had that in the year 2023. And then in 2024, to take us further to have a comprehensive new strategic plan, we had a situation analysis of the ecosystem. And we also reassembled stakeholders to validate the reports, the two reports, the situation analysis report, and then the comprehensive assessment report. That informed a brainstorming session in drafting the new strategic plan. And that is where we are now. The next slide will take us through step by step what we did as a country based on experiences from the past. So the first thing we did was a comprehensive assessment initiation. And what we meant by that is that because implementation of CRVS was based on the previous strategic plan, most of the CRVS implementation activities that we had as a country were based on the strategy, the thematic areas in the previous assessment reports, and that elapsed in the year 2020. Therefore, referring to that document, which has elapsed in implementing going forward assessment activity, was a bit of a challenge. So we needed to really look at the system, what worked during the previous implementation, what didn't work, where the gaps are. That should inform way forward how CRVS implementation has to be done. So we did that by engaging with all the actors in the CRVS chain. We had a comprehensive pre-engagement with all the key stakeholders, and then we also identify other additional institutions that had to be on board based on previous experiences. So that helped us to identify and gather key stakeholders, including others that were not part of the process during the first assessment. And we convey all key institutions for coordination and consultation. This was very open, including at the early stages, the Ministry of Finance, NDPC, all the actors when it comes to policy implementation in the CRVS change. What we did next was also to engage the development partners, one after the other. And for this, I would like to extend our gratitude to UNECA, who was key in this engagement with the partners. UNECA, representatives from UNECA were part of the engagement in Ghana, and we were able to engage them early enough to brief them on the next steps that we want to take as a country in entering the new assessment, and then how, looking forward, we want the strategic plan to look like. Then there were engagement of a consultant. So we did all this before the consultant was engaged. So before the consultant was engaged, we actually knew what we were looking out for in the assessment. We had data collection, and the purpose for we having a data collection was that we implemented a number of activities in the previous strategic plan. So the data collection was to help us to know to what extent has the implementation impacted on the ecosystem and where the gaps are. That would inform the assessment report. So we did that at both the national level, the regional level, and then the district level, which is the lowest level of governance. The next slide, please. Yes, so strategic planning process, phase 2, validation and finalization. We had to organize stakeholders again to validate the findings from the assessment, and then the assessment, and then the situational analysis that was done after the assessment was conducted. We had a brainstorming on the strategic plan session that facilitated technical session to draft the CRVS strategic plan. This time around, we did not allow the consultants to do the work alone. We had to sit together based on the previous strategic plan and the experiences we had from it, and together we drafted the strategic plan. And what we did was, after that has been done, we shared to all stakeholders. We circulated that to all stakeholders again to have further inputs and comments into that. Then we had a final validation of the strategic plan. We hosted a national validation workshop to finalize the document. And where we are now is to launch the new strategic plan, had an official launch, and then dissemination of the plan. The next slide, please. The next slide, please. Yes, so what did we do? Post-implementation strategy. Like I mentioned, we identified the root causes of underperformance by applying the business process mapping methodology. We propose recommendations and solutions that will help to address the identified root causes of underperformance. We had to do that comprehensively. And then the situation analysis look at a comprehensive assessment of further analysis, including SWOT analysis, from the basis for development and subsequent CRVS strategic plan. So we did all these things together to inform the drafting of the initial strategic plan that had currently been validated. The next slide, please. Yes, so the context of analysis, we looked at the global context, we looked at the national context, looking at the births, deaths, marriages, and divorces. And we had to really look at it because a number of interventions were implemented during the previous strategic plan. So we had to dive into it again and really look at what was really working well and what was really not working well. That informed the SWOT analysis. Recommendations were made, and then the lessons and outstanding issues from the previous analysis were also considered. The next slide, please. Yes, so one of the key things in implementing strategic plan is national commitments that require CRVS data. So we had to look at the ecosystem again, which national policy implementations are there that is requiring the use of CRVS data. So we look at the NDPC systems, international commitments, the SDGs, the Agenda 2063, and then the sector medium-term expenditure framework. We had to consider that, looking at the local governance, chieftaincy, and religious affairs. We look at the interior, the health sector, and also what is the legal system saying, the Office of the Attorney General, and then the Ministry of Justice. So we had to really go extra mile to make sure that this time around we have an all-inclusive strategy, and from the scratch we bring on board everyone that needed to be brought on board. The next slide, please. Yes, so we actually looked at some thematic areas. I'm going to mention a few for the purpose of time and this presentation. Shall we move on to the next slide, please? Yes, so we actually looked at the enabling policies and legal environments. I mentioned earlier that the earlier plan informed the review of some of the legal instruments and legislative instruments and SOPs. But we also noticed that there are still gaps when it comes to even the review legal instruments. During implementation, we also identified there are some gaps that needed to be relooked at. So it's one of the thematic areas we looked at. The slides will be available for further readings by participants. Can we move on to the next thematic area, please? Yes, so awareness, support, and utilization of CRVS data is very key. Continuous awareness and publication of timely and use of key information for public education on the use of statistics is one area that needed to be emphasized, and that we think it should be a continuous engagement. Building of staff capacity to use different platforms to disseminate information for public education, it's also very key. And then research and academia to publish research and journal on Ghana's CRVS system is also an area that we needed to emphasize more. The next slide, please. So sustainable funding is one of the key areas that we also looked at. In the previous strategy, getting funding was a challenge because the plan was for us to have government funding set aside for the implementation of the strategy, which had a few challenges because we're not able to terminate that process. So this time around, we had to adapt a new strategy on how to have sustainable funding to implement. So we looked at a few areas. Train staff on donor scoping, proposal writing, and project management is key to the implementation of the new strategy. Increase development partners' engagement by involving focal persons in CRVS activity is also an area that we looked at. Produce customized statistical reports on requests for fees. It's an area that we think if we are able to customize the statistical reports, it's something that can generate some revenue to implement some activities. So it's one area that we are engaging, and then engaging appropriate government authority to renew levies on special requests for CRVS legal documentations. And then engaging industry and chambers of commerce on the use of statistics for corporate value maximization. These are areas that we looked at critically and had a long brainstorming sessions around this to inform how we can sustain funding for the new strategic plan. The next slide, please. So the enabling factors, I mentioned a few, looking at governance, external and internal. What we meant by that is to build strong governance system to provide leadership and direction for implementation of CRVS strategic activity, which is very key. Governance, leadership is key if the new strategy had to be implemented perfectly. Leadership is key. So we're looking at both the external governance system and then the internal. Monitoring and evaluation and learnings are also some enabling factors. Research and development, financial and risk management is also an area that was considered. The next slide, please. Yes, so in the analysis of the strategic response, looking at the thematic areas, each thematic areas and the objective and actions and outcomes that are expected, just to list a few. For objectives, we had a total of 28 objectives. We have 160 actions to achieve that. And we're able to count 128 outcomes. That is if we are able to, all things being equal, implement this new strategy as we have put our heads together to develop. The next slide, please. So one new thing that we did this time around is to develop a financial dashboard. This will guide the financial commitments. And as you are aware, between the time a strategic plan is developed and implementation, there may be changes in budget allocations and all that. So what this dashboard aims to do is, in the event there is some financial adjustments and all that, once we input the figures, the dashboard will give us a clear picture of how the financial commitment and would look like. And we believe if donor partners and government sees this dashboard clearly on how the financial commitments look like and how the expenditure will look like, it will help in sourcing enough funding for the implementation of the new strategy. The next slide, please. Yes, so this is just a footage from the validation workshop just to show how comprehensive it was and also to show how extensive we engage with stakeholders, including the minister in charge of civil registration, who is the minister for local government, chieftaincy, and religious affairs. I don't know if it will play, if we can try to play just some 1 minute footage.
The validation workshop is a critical step in a process which began in 2015, seeking to harmonize data on national identity from cradle to grave. The system will capture essential life events, births, deaths, causes of death, marriages and divorces, ensuring every Ghanaian is counted and recognized in line with global best practices and the UN SDG 16.9, which talks about legal identity for all by 2030. Acting Registrar of Births and Deaths, Samuel Adom Boche, noted that the document, when complete, will be a game changer to Ghana's national identity database for effective developmental planning.
This document is very vital to the agenda of His Excellency John Dramani Mahama. When this document is validated and integrated into the system, we'll get to know for how many people are passed on, how many people, the newborn babies and divorce, all those people. So this document is a vital document. That is why the president is taking key interest in the document.
On her part, Deputy Minister for Local Government, Chieftaincy and Religious Affairs, Rita Naudolesoa, urged stakeholders to be deliberate about inclusivity in the validation process.
Metropolitan, municipal and district assemblies, MMDAs, have an especially important role as the front runners of public service delivery. Their commitment to data collection, community mobilization, resource allocation will be central to the implementation success. And to this, I want to add that when we go out to carry out the registration exercises, we should look out for the persons with disability, because most of the time some parents hide their children and do not want to bring them out. So let's engage the communities to let us know what happens in their communities.
The validation is spearheaded by the Births and Deaths Registry and supported by vital partners, including the Ministry of Local Government, Chieftaincy and Religious Affairs, Ghana Health Service, Ghana Statistical Service, Judicial Service, Ghana Police Service, plus developmental allies like UNICEF, UNFPA, and UNECA.
Okay, so this is how extensive
The validation workshop is a critical
step. Can we have
step.
the next slide, please? Yes. This is how engaging the new process was. We make sure from day one we have involved all stakeholders that we could identify for the successful implementation. Where we are now, the strategic plan is ready. It's in production. Once it's done, we would have an official launch. We would host it. It will be online. There will be few hard copies. It will be online. And then the next step, early 2026, is to engage the Parliamentary Select Committee on Local Governance on the strategic plan and its implementation processes. So I would like to thank you for your attention and on standby to respond to any clarity or questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Emmanuel. It was really interesting to hear the experiences of a country that has transitioned through all of these stages of CRVS strengthening and has successfully developed the strategic and action plan. And I'm sure this will provide many valuable insights for other countries who are planning to do the same. It was also really exciting to hear about the high level of political engagement in Ghana and also the driving forces behind that. So that brings us to our last section of this webinar. We've whizzed through most of the main section, and this is the opportunity for our audience to ask any questions to our wonderful speakers. So please do post your questions into the chat box, and if you wish to direct your question to a specific speaker, please do indicate. There was already one question in the chat. Oh, I see another one about sharing presentations. Yes, the presentations will be shared online at the end of this session or by the end of today. But there was a question in the chat for Nicola. So I'll call on you first, Nicola, if that's okay. And it's from Raj. Are you asking countries to share their experience in a template that you will provide? So this is experience related to completed assessments. And will there be a link provided so that readers can refer to the original document, such as the AAR reports and strategic action plans produced by countries?
Thank you. Thanks, Chloe. Thanks, Raj. I'm going to try and steal the screen again, if I can, if that's all right. So if I go to the new website that we've got, so this is where we have the space here for country use cases and examples, and we have got the email address there again, but I agree, Raj, I could put the Word template there that people can download to then email to us so that we get this standardized information from each country. When you refer to original documents, any country document that's already published and is publicly available, so for example, here's Burkina Faso's system analysis, we've got Cambodia as well, their AAR report, so any document that countries have already published and have made publicly available, yes, we're linking all of them to the site so that there's kind of a central repository so that people can go back and you know, review the various plans and documents that have been created. And of course, as countries move through and create more, you know, we can expand this to include not just the reports, but other useful documents, you know, that have been developed along the way that other countries may like to use. So I hope that answers the questions. Thank you. I'll stop sharing now. Oh, you're on mute, Chloe.
Thanks. I knew that was going to happen at least one point. So we have a question from Martin from Vital Strategies in the chat, and it's directed to Emmanuel. And the question is around, in terms of the vital statistics data for the private sector, do you already have an understanding about the demand for this?
Yes. I mentioned one of the areas, the thematic areas we were looking at critically is the use of the customized statistics that had to be produced. You understand? Currently, yes, there are some production of statistics that is going on, standard statistics that is being produced. But how do we take it further to customize the statistics that will be useful to will be more useful to the private sector? It's one of the key areas that we're looking at in the new strategy. And because it's an area that we're looking at during implementation, there will be further stakeholder engagement on how that can be achieved. So to answer that, yes, we need to take it to the next level to really understand how what we need to do to produce those customized statistics that will be useful to the private sector. So yes, Martin, yes, we'll definitely engage to come out clear on how to do that. But standard statistics are available currently as we speak. But how useful are they to the private sector?
Thanks, Emmanuel. And yeah, it's a good question. And I think engaging with the private sector is an area which is going to become increasingly important these days, especially with the global funding squeeze. If there are any other questions to our speakers in the chat, please feel free to post them. And while we're waiting, I'm going to go to Pravin for a question. That's okay. So Pravin, I think something that really stood out to me during the stakeholder workshops in Bihar was the strong engagement of participants and the value that they really placed on being meaningfully involved in the process that could lead to system-wide improvements. And I think this really reflects exactly the participatory and country-led approach that the framework kind of advocates for. So in Bihar, you engaged a large group of field-level personnel in the assessment and redesign workshops. How did involving those frontline staff change the quality of the insights and also shape the recommendations that emerged from the assessment?
Actually, we use all type of frontline staff like DSO, District Assessment Officer, DSO, Block Assessment Officer, HSO, ASO, medical officer, data entry operator, and etc., who are directly providing registration service in the field. Actually, their active involvement and input help us to redesign our CRVS system, and recommendation basically came from them. Actually, they all are all are in a supporting role of registration system, who help them register to improve the how to improve the registration system. So we engage all types of staff in a one platform. It helps us to redesign the workshop. Thank you.
Thanks, Pravin. And yeah, I think it's been really clear in Bihar, and I think it's that engagement with frontline workers has also continued throughout the project, which is really good. I'll continue with you if that's okay. I have another question for you. What were the most surprising or significant gaps that emerged through this process, and how did the framework help reveal them?
Actually, it was observed by us that in our regular review meeting, like a state level meeting or district level review meeting, we saw that all our frontline staff like DSO and registrar always defend our performance during that meeting. But in a workshop, during the workshop, redesign workshop, they came up with various type of useful ideas to implement or improve CRVS system. This was surprising for us also.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So Emmanuel, I'm gonna come back to you for a question. So I think your presentation was very useful for countries who still may be in that assessment phase, and it'll be extremely valuable for them to learn from Ghana's experience, especially as you've transitioned to that strategic action planning phase. During the assessment and consultation phase, what were some of the key challenges or system gaps that emerged in Ghana, and how did they shape the direction of your strategic objectives?
Thank you very much. One of the things I would say is that working with multiple stakeholders, it's quite challenging, especially where you don't have one legislative instrument harmonizing the activities of all these key stakeholders. So yes, there were some challenges during the engagement. Sometimes, institutions will want to protect their environment and what they do. So trying to come in to say, hey, look, we need to sit, we need to rethink, we need to look at the ecosystem as an ecosystem and not as an individual level system. It's quite challenging. But one thing that helped us most was that a lot of the institution had the staff that participated in the earlier assessment and the strategic plan. So that was easy for us a bit because they already understand the system. They participated fully in the system. And then one thing that also helped minimize the challenge was the CRVS coordination meetings that we used to have. It's a bit slow now, but that also helped minimize the challenges along the way. One other challenge that came up strongly was our inability to implement fully the previous activities in the strategic plan. So the question is that, how is it going to be again? But the approach, we need to engage, continuous engagement, also helped to minimize the challenges and taking the way, allow us to move forward with the new strategy. Continuous engagement, not just coming around at a 2-day or a 3-day workshop, but continuous engagement in the form of inviting key stakeholders into individual institutions' activity. So for instance, if one key stakeholder is having activity, tries to bring on board the other institution to participate in that activity. So that gave us a leverage platform to realize that, oh, we are dependent on each other. We need each other to make the ecosystem work. Therefore, your strength may be my weakness. My weakness may be your strength. So together we put our energies together, and that helped us move forward. The other challenge was because we were trying also to get from the start the high level interest in the whole process. It really slowed us down a bit because we needed to make sure they've understood the next steps we wanted to take and get their involvement right from the start. And that also was a bit of a challenge, but at the end of the day, we're able to get all of them on board. And also engagement with the key partners. Key partners will also want to understand clearly what will be new, what will change. And we needed to continuously engage with them to understand clearly the new path we want to chart, the strategies we have in place to get resources to implement the new strategy. So it wasn't an easy process, but with strong coordination. And in such process, what I would advise countries is that you need a few committed people to drive the whole process. It's very key. You needed a strong, committed people to drive the whole process. And that's, I can assure countries that once they have, you don't need a larger number to drive the process, but get a few strong, committed people who will be consistent with the process. And the challenges, they will be there, but they will gradually be phasing out systematically.
Thanks, Emmanuel. And yeah, I really resonated with what you said about saying how it's important to consider it as a continual process. You know, CRVS system strengthening is not just a one-time thing. It's something which should be done iteratively and also continuously, and you know, building on those previous improvements to really strengthen the system. And then you also raised a good point about you know, different ministries and agencies sometimes wanting to protect their own environment. And I think that's something which definitely isn't unique to the Ghanaian context, but you know, it's something which we also see in many countries in Asia and the Pacific and also globally as well. And I think it really goes to show the importance of those strong coordination mechanisms and showing how, you know, this CRVS system strengthening, it takes a whole of government approach, not just the agency responsible for civil registration. Okay, so I've got one last question for Nicola before we close the session. So Nicola, during your presentation, you mentioned that this updated framework supports the transition away from passive approaches towards proactive CRVS systems. Please, could you say a bit more about what is meant by proactive CRVS systems?
Sure can. And there's another question that's popped up in the chat as well for one of the speakers too. So yes, and this has actually been raised as we've all been speaking. So at the core of making, you know, our processes proactive is really the idea of not sitting back and waiting for the data, you know, to come to you. So really any process that relies on people, you know, trying to reduce or remove or replace that, right? We want to make sure, as was mentioned, you know, that we're not expecting people to be moving the paper or the data around for us. So, you know, when you do your process mapping, that's often when these bottlenecks are highlighted really clearly, particularly if we're relying on families, for example, to be moving our notification forms, maybe from a health facility to the civil registrar, and we're losing, you know, all of these birth notifications. How can we, you know, make those processes better, whether it's automatic data transfer, whether it's putting, you know, civil registration staff in the health facilities. There's lots of different approaches that can be taken, but it's really trying to get this active system that's out there, proactively collecting the data, moving it between these different agencies. As we've mentioned, sometimes that can be tricky because, you know, we're a big family, and that can make things a bit tricky in civil registration, but just trying, you know, to get those links and getting moving, you know, getting this really important information moving around rather than that kind of passive approach. And just very quickly as well, Emmanuel raised it a few times in his presentation, but around funding and the need for sustainable, you know, financing and country ownership. And I do want to mention that in the second version of the framework, there's also been a lot more emphasis around the importance of, you know, thinking about sustainable country financing from the start of the process, not kind of something at the end, you know, once we've got our amazing strategic plan and now we're looking for funding support, but, you know, from the very beginning, what can we be doing? You know, there's the new tool that's been developed as well from GHAI around, you know, budgeting and planning. And there's just been that real reflection too, that as part of creating these proactive systems and these refined systems, we need to make sure that there's the money to do it, or our strategic plans will probably just sit on the shelf. So I think that was an important point just to raise again, to say that we're trying to address that in version 2.0. Thank you.
Very good point. Thank you very much, Nicola, for finishing up this and closing off this webinar very nicely. So I think that's all we have time for today. I would like to say a big thank you to all of our speakers for taking the time out of their busy days to share their insights during today's session, and also to our audience for listening in. The updated framework is now live, and you can access it using the link that has been put into the chat box. And finally, if I can ask my colleague to kindly put up the last slide onto the into the Teams meeting. We would also like to use this opportunity to advertise the Asia Pacific Collaborative, which is a new regional community on LinkedIn, which is open to anybody. So please feel free to join. I'll see if I can share my slide so that you can have the QR code. The QR code has been put into the chat. So it's a regional community of officers and statisticians working together to share knowledge, strengthen capacity, and promote collaboration on data and statistics for sustainable development across Asia and the Pacific. So you'll find regular updates from ESCAP in there, from countries and also other development partners on activities happening around the region and also globally. So if you have LinkedIn, please feel free to join by scanning the QR code that's in the chat box. And with that, I want to say thank you very much again and wish you a good rest of the day. Thank you for joining.